This story starts with our female lead opening her eyes while feeling cold. My body feels numb. She heard voice of glass breaking and wonders what was that noise. A boy was crying over her, and tears were dropping from his face. She looks at the boy and thinks, what mesmerizing eyes. But why is he sobbing? His tears are warm. And she closes her eyes again. After some time she opens her eyes in a room. All the maids seeing her wake up rush towards her calling, Your Majesty! Her Royal Majesty is awake! Her Majesty has awakened! He feels dizzy, she thinks, Her Majesty? Who are they referring to? She looks towards them and wondered, wait, are they talking about me? Then she looks at herself in the mirror and realized that she's changed. She wondered, what on earth happened to me? Where am I? Who am I? While taking medicine, she said, so bitter? The maid told, you have to take your medicine if you want to recover faster, Your Majesty. She takes medicine with and said, fine. After days of enduring bitter medicine and speaking with different people. Diana? Yes, ma'am. I came to the realization that I had somehow entered the world of a romance novel called Lady and the Beast. That was one incredible read. Lady and the Beast was a fantasy romance novel loosely inspired by the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast. The main characters were Blake, the cursed beastly crown prince, and the wild Richard, who both fought to win the heart of the heroine, Diana. I had somehow found myself in the body of Anthea, who was Diana's half-sister. By marrying Crown Prince Blake, Anthea became a princess. However, Anthea took one look at Blake's face, marked by the hereditary curse of his royal family, and took her own life on their wedding day. This incident plunged Blake into despair. He saw himself as a monster and shut himself, and his heart, away from the outside world. His soul descended into darkness, and unable to win Diana's heart, he passed away tragically young. According to the novel, Anthea drowns in the lake, and Blake dives in to recover her lifeless body. But now that my soul is in Anthea's body, she didn't die. She recalled, that young boy from yesterday must have been Blake. If you despise me so much, she thinks, he seemed to cry for me so earnestly that night, but he hasn't come to see me, not even once. It's already been 5 days since I woke up. He must be in pain. His bride tried to end her life because of his cursed appearance. It would be strange if he were all right. She then tries to stand up. The maid said, Oh, Your Majesty, do you want to go somewhere? She replied, I want to visit the Crown Prince. The maid asked, You want to see His Royal Highness? Madam, with all due respect, the Crown Prince was deeply shocked by what happened. Perhaps it would be best if you waited a few more days before making any announcements, Anthea said. Don't worry about anything. Just lead the way. The maid complied. Yes, Your Majesty. While walking in the hallway following the maid, Anthea thinks, I have no intention of leaving Blake. In fact, in Lady and the Beast, Blake was my favorite character. Oh no, I couldn't believe it when Diana chose Richard over Blake. Poor Blake. Now, I have the chance to rewrite Blake's tragically dark past. There's no way I'm giving that up. Besides, Anthea has nowhere else to go. Anthea was the daughter of Count Valencia and his first wife. Her mother passed away during childbirth, and the Count quickly remarried. Soon after, his second daughter, Diana, was born. The Count and his new wife treated Anthea cruelly and sent her off to marry the Crown Prince, fully aware of his curse and his fate of an early death. Anthea didn't take her own life solely because of Blake's cursed face. She threw herself into the icy water out of despair from being abandoned by her family. She resolved, so, even if I leave this place, I have no home to return to. And I have no intention of letting Blake drown in his own despair. Anthea opens the door and went inside. She said, Your Majesty? It's me, Anthea. The prince was hiding himself in a blanket, he said. No! Stay away from me! Anthea stops and said, Please, Your Majesty. The prince again shouted, hiding himself. Don't come near me! I am horribly disfigured! Leave! I will scare you. He was trembling and crying. Anthea thinks in her mind, he doesn't resent me for trying to end my life. He's scared of scaring me. Anthea then takes a sigh and went ahead and pulled his blanket away from him. Panicked by this, the prince said, No! He looks at Anthea, then again hides his face. He said, What do you think you're doing? How dare you take my blanket? Anthea said in her mind, Hey, people will get the wrong idea. You silly novel character. She thinks, where is the dark, brooding Blake, the master of charm? He's more like a soft, fluffy bunny. Well, first things first, Anthea said. I have something to tell you, Prince Blake. She then peels off the eye patch from Prince's face. The prince shouted, Hey! How dare you! Turning his face, he said, don't look. Anthea grabs his face with both of her hands and said, Why not? You are stunning, your majesty. The prince asked while confused. What? She told. I have never seen anyone as breathtaking as you. Anthea thinks in her mind, I'm not saying this to comfort you. It's the truth. His left face may be covered with the black whorls of his family curse, but his large eyes, regal nose, tender lips, and graceful chin all come together in angelic harmony. It's undeniably a beautiful face. Looking at his face, she thinks, when you meet Diana, you will be released from your curse. Once the curse mark is erased from Blake's face, he will be described as the most handsome man on the continent. Even now, he has such a pretty face. Averting his gaze, he said, But, you hate me. Anthea replied, I don't hate you. The prince said, But. Anthea continued, Let me make this clear, Your Highness. I did not try to commit suicide. I slipped and fell into the lake by accident. She thinks in her mind, well, that's not exactly true. Anthea really did commit suicide from the shock of her betrothed's cursed appearance. However, I have decided to pretend that it was an accident, since I am now Anthea. If it had been me, I would never have jumped into the lake because of Blake's face. Blake asked, Are you telling the truth? Anthea replied, Yes. I heard that you saved me from drowning. I came here to thank you for saving my life. Blake asked, Are you really thankful? She replied, Yes, Your Highness. How could I not be when you saved my life? Tears came falling from Blake's face. While sobbing, he said, I thought you killed yourself because of me. Anthea smiles and said, Why would I do that? I have everything to live for. I married you. Blake, trying to stop his tears, said, I thought you might hate me for saving your life. That's why I was afraid to see you. Anthea thinks in her mind, he must have been so distressed during the 5 days I was unconscious. Anthea hugs him and said, No, Prince Blake. My dear husband, I really like you. Hug, so please don't worry about anything. Blake also hugs her and said, I like you too. Anthea tells in her mind, Haha. Blake, you big fat liar. You like my little sister. In the novel Lady and the Beast, Blake likes the main character Diana. When the Emperor learned of Blake's fondness for Diana, he requested the Count of Valencia to arrange a marriage for the two. However, Count Valencia refused to send his beloved Diana to wed the cursed crown prince and sent Anthea instead. Well, a little white lie is sometimes better than the harsh, ugly truth. Anthea then said, Then shall we share a bed from now on? Hearing this, Blake gets shocked and crawls back. He blushed. Not realizing the consequences, Anthea thinks, Hey, yo, Mr. Subhero, why do you look so alarmed? You're making me feel like I suggested something scandalous. Anthea thinks in her mind, the House of Valencia possessed the power of light. Diana was able to free Blake from his curse because of the Valencia family's power of light. Anthea was also a daughter of Valencia, but her powers were not as strong as Diana's, who was the chosen successor. Still, she too had the power. Prince Blake's curse wasn't simply a skin-deep mark, it also caused him excruciating pain. The pain got worse in cold weather. Yet, he jumped into the freezing lake in the middle of winter to save me. I'm sure he endured agonizing pain. She thinks, and knowing him, he's hardly the type to express it. He must have suffered in silence. The Valencia power of light is unleashed through physical contact. The more intimate the touch, the more intense its restorative powers. This resulted in some really intense, seductive scenes. So steamy. Blake is still too young for that kind of treatment, but I was hoping to at least hold his hand. But if he's going to act this way, I don't think I'll be able to do anything. Explaining him, Anthea said, Your Highness, please do not misunderstand me. We are married, so it's only natural that we sleep together. It's really nothing to be afraid of. Blake blushed and said, but I'm so embarrassed. Looking at him blushing, Anthea thinks, what happened to the wild masculinity of the original Prince Blake? I only see a red-eyed bunny rabbit. She tells in her mind, in 10 years, will this bunny boy really grow into a sexy beast? Human transformation is really quite something. Feeling determined, she thinks, anyway, I can't leave this sick child alone like this. Anthea pulls his blanket and said, Come with me. Anthea grabs his hands and said, Since we are married, from now on, we must sleep together every night. Getting startled, Blake asked, Every night? Anthea asked with a smirk, What's wrong? Don't you want to? He replied, No, I didn't say that. Anthea, are you really okay with this? She asked. With what? He again asked. Are you sure you want to sleep with me? She replied without hesitation. Of course, Prince Blake. Like I said, I really like you. Blake blushed again and thinks she says she likes me. Anthea asked. What do you think? Do you feel comfortable holding my hand? Holding his hands, Anthea tries to observe. Can he feel the power of light releasing him from his curse? Ah, Anthea thinks. According to the novel, the pain of Blake's curse would subside when he and Diana held hands. Since I'm a Valencia, my touch should have some effect too. But it doesn't seem to be working. I don't see any change. Since I've somehow entered this universe, I really want to relieve some of Blake's pain. While she was busy thinking Blake was continuously blushing, she resolved, I guess my powers aren't strong enough. She leaves his hands and turns. Huh! Blake stops her and said, No, don't go. As she was about to leave, he hugs her from behind and said, Anthea, your hand. Your hand is so nice and warm. He said, so please, don't leave me. Blake's teary voice. Anthea replied, Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. He asked. Really? She replied, trying to reassure him. Yes, really. I just came down from the bed to pick up the blanket. Blushing, Blake crawled back. Anthea smiles and thinks, after giving me a back hug, he trembled. She said, If you don't want to sleep with me, he asked. His voice was breaking. No, it's not that. I just wanted to make sure. Are you really willing to sleep with a monster like me? Anthea scolded him gently. Your Highness, please don't say that word. You are not a monster, he stammered. But, Anthea gently lifted his hands and said, Didn't I tell you? I think you are so beautiful. You are far from being a monster. And not only that, your curse will be broken someday. Blake asked, with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. My curse will be broken, she told. Yes, I'm sure of it. When you turn 18, your curse will be broken, and you will live happily ever after. So until then, please be strong and ignore what other people say. He questioned, while sounding uncertain. When I'm 18? Anthea explained in her mind. In the Valencia family, just as one member always becomes the successor and protector of the power of light, one person in the Zerthilian imperial household always inherits the family curse. Long ago, the first emperor, Philip, became the lover of the goddess of light. As a sign of her affection, she bestowed some of her powers upon him, and with this power, Philip founded a mighty empire. However, after becoming emperor, Philip betrayed the goddess and fell in love with another woman. In her rage, the goddess cursed his descendants, a curse that would be passed down through time. The cursed successor would bear black birthmarks on their face that would slowly and painfully spread over their body, ultimately leading to death before adulthood. Even you, Blake, come close to death on the night of your 18th birthday. But when you meet Diana, you'll be freed from the curse, Anthea said, holding out her pinky. I promise you, you will never be defeated by the Zerthilian curse. Cross my heart and hope to die. Hearing this, Blake snatches away his hand and said, No, don't ever say that again. You must never die, Anthea. Even if I die, you must live. He trembles while saying. Anthea grabs his trembling hand and said, Don't worry, I won't die. And neither will you, Prince Blake. So don't worry, he whispered, while his voice is shaky. Anthea, she said as she wiped his tears. My dear husband is such a crybaby, he protested. I am not a crybaby, she teased. Yes, you are, he insisted. I am not. She showed him smiling and asked, Then why is my handkerchief all wet? Blake repeated, but his voice was soft. I am not a crybaby, she comforted him. All right. It's okay, he wailed softly. No, Anthea said, gently patting his back. Everything will be okay, don't worry. His eyes glittered as he blinked sleepily. He fell asleep. She murmured before opening her eyes the next day. She wondered, watching his innocent, sleeping face. Did he hold my hand all night long? He's so cute, she thought. She gently patted his head, but then his eyes fluttered open. Bale opens his eyes and smiles, she asked. Huh! Why are you smiling? He replied, while his face was glowing with joy. Because I'm so happy, she asked, while surprised. Why? He said, his voice filled with warmth. Because you are lying by my side. She was touched by his words. She thought to herself as the birds outside chirped in the early morning. I wish I could always make you smile like this, she tells in her mind. The next few days passed peacefully. I spent all my time with Blake. One thing I noticed was that Blake rarely left his room unless it was absolutely necessary. He would eat and read in his room, keeping to himself. I also noticed something peculiar about his eating habits. Not again, greens! More greens, Anthea thought, staring at the plate in front of her. For 3 days in a row, during every single meal, it's the same thing. Does the cook think we're rabbits? The menu was almost identical each day. This is the same salty soup as yesterday's, she asked, siding at the table. Prince Blake, what kind of food do you like? While eating, he answered, I like everything. She probed further. Do you enjoy meat and fish? He replied eagerly, yes. Anthea concluded. Okay, so Blake is not a vegetarian. He may be cursed, but he has no dietary restrictions, she thinks in her mind. Then why is it always wilted salad and rehashed leftovers? I wondered. There could only be one reason. The staff had no respect for the monster, Crown Prince. Blake may be the Crown Prince and I his wife, but we were young and powerless. The servants were blatantly slighting us. The current Lord Chamberlain, Brown, the eldest son of Marquis Hamill, had clearly gone too far. Then Blake asked, Anthea? Is the food not to your liking? And wanting to worry him, she lied. No, no! The food is fine, Anthea called. Melissa. She came and responded. Yes, Your Highness, she said. After the meal, please ask the Lord Chamberlain to come to my room. There's something I need to ask him. Melissa responded with a bow. Yes, Your Royal Highness. Turning her attention to Prince Blake, Anthea offered him. Try these roasted mushrooms. Blake hesitated. I don't really care for mushrooms, Anthea insisted. You must eat them. They're good for you. Come on, now. She watched him as he complied. Don't just wash it down with water. Chew it before swallowing. Blake took a bite, gulping it down, and feels proud I ate it, he said softly, holding her hand. Your hand is so nice and warm. Whenever I hold your hand, I feel better, Anthea. Anthea puffed her cheeks in delight. So cute, she thought, her heart swelling. She said, I'm so glad. Now eat the rest of the mushrooms, Blake said obediently. Okay. As she watched him eat, Anthea wondered to herself, if my hand comforts Blake, does this mean I also possess some power of light? After some time, the servant said. Your Royal Highness, Lord Chamberlain Brown is here to see you, Anthea told. Show him in. Lord Brown entered, bowing slightly. Your Royal Highness, how may I be of service? Anthea observed him and thinks, he was the eldest son of Marquis Hamill, and he hadn't appeared once while she was bedridden. As the son of a marquis, he must think he outranks me, the child bride of the cursed prince. Anthea began, her voice laced with irritation. I find the quality of the Crown Prince's meals rather atrocious. Brown chuckled lightly, clearly unimpressed. Is that why you called me? I had expected it to be more urgent business. Anthea's eyes narrowed and her voice grew heated. The Crown Prince is the light of the Empire, but the meals he is served are not even fit to feed livestock. If this isn't urgent business, I don't know what is. Brown sneered. The light of the Empire. Your Royal Highness, you are new to this, so you probably aren't aware that the budget set aside to maintain the Crown Prince's household is not very high. His Imperial Majesty does not give us sufficient funds, so what can we do but scrimp and save? Anthea thought, blatant liar. She thought perhaps the Crown Prince's allocations doesn't allow for luxuries, but I'm sure it is enough to provide meat at the table. She kept her composure. I understand, she said calmly. Brown, misinterpreting her response, said, What a relief! I was afraid you might not understand the situation because of your youth. I am so glad your Highness proves to be sensible. Anthea's expression hardened. She said, I shall release you from your duties. Brown's face paled. He furiously asked, What? What did you just say? He was clearly taken aback. Anthea called out, Lord Edmund. Then she said, Take Brown Hamill to the dungeon for embezzlement of the imperial coffers, and make sure to carry out a thorough investigation of his crime. Brown roared as his face turning red with rage. Embezzlement? Do you even know the meaning of that word? Anthea responded coldly. I do. What you did is the very definition of embezzlement. Brown trembled, his confidence waning. He shouted as Lord Edmund approached. Unhand me at once! Do you know who I am? I am the heir to Marquis Hamill. That little girl married the cursed monster, and now she wants to play princess? Anthea remained calm as Brown was dragged away, his threats echoing in the hallway. Mark my words! You will pay for this! He screamed. Anthea instructed. Please add this to the list of Brown's crimes: contempt of the Crown Prince and Princess. Lord Edmund responded with a nod. Yes, Your Royal Highness. After that, Lord Edmund dragged away Brown as he was shouting, "Let go of me." I said, "Let go." Lord Edmund stares at him, and Brown froze in fear. After the commotion settled, the court of the Crown Prince fell into murmurs and confusion. But Anthea wasn't done. She decided to go one step further. She fired almost all of the palace staff. "This is the list you requested, Your Highness." Melissa handed her a parchment. Anthea carefully reviewed it. In Lady and the Beast, after Blake is stripped of his position as Crown Prince, most of his staff betray him immediately and go off to join Richard. There's no need to keep future betrayers by his side. She flipped through the list, marking names. Him, and him too. She made her decision. Everyone on the list with a mark next to his or her name is fired. She got rid of everyone who would betray Blake in the novel. A silence fell over the halls, and Anthea thinks, now that the palace was almost empty. Melissa, looking anxious, approached Anthea. "Excuse me, Your Highness. All the staff were chosen by the Emperor himself. Would it be all right to dismiss them all?" Looking at her worried, Anthea thinks, "Poor Melissa. She really looks worried." Anthea smiled gently at Melissa. "It's all right. Don't worry about a thing." Melissa's face glowed and she said, "Yes, ma'am. When would you like dinner to be served?" Anthea blinked, remembering that she had sent off all the cooks. She waved it off. "You don't have to worry about that either. I'm going to cook today." Melissa's eyes widened in shock. "Your Highness can cook?" Anthea replied with a grin. "Yes. I was roaming through the castle, and I found something quite interesting. Follow me, and I'll show you." Melissa followed Anthea through the halls until they arrived at the place that Anthea wanted to show. Melissa was shocked that how did the princess come all the way here. Anthea dramatically unveiled what she had found. "Tada!" Melissa stared in disbelief. "Your Highness, what in the world are these?" Anthea beamed with excitement. "Look, this is doenjang," she said, holding up a jar. "And this is gochujang?" Melissa asked, confused. "Doenjang? Gochujang?" Anthea smiled, holding the jars up. "They are condiments from the Orient. Adding these fermented sauces will enhance the flavor of food," Melissa exclaimed, awe evident in her voice. "Your Highness, how do you know so much? Are you, maybe, a genius?" Anthea chuckled nervously and said, When I was a child I read about them, in books," she replied, mentally apologizing for the lie. "Sorry for lying, Melissa." Melissa remembered hearing that the Emperor had gathered flavors and spices from all corners of the world to please his Empress, but she never expected the palace to have such a wide array of ingredients. Anthea thought, "This makes me so mad. The kitchen had all these wonderful ingredients, but only served us salad greens." Anthea took a deep breath, rolling up her sleeves. "Now then, shall we begin?" The kitchen soon filled with the sounds of sizzling, chopping, and sprinkling. Anthea worked efficiently, her hands moving with practiced ease. After a while, she stepped back, wiping her brow. "Phew, all done!" Melissa's eyes sparkled with admiration. "Our princess is a genius in the kitchen." While grinning, Anthea said, "Shall we call the prince to dinner?" As the dishes were laid out, steam rising and fragrances filling the room, Blake asked. His curiosity was piqued. "Whoa, what is all this?" Anthea explained. "It's Oriental cuisine, Your Highness," she said. "I once read about it in a book. All the ingredients were in the pantry, so I gave it a try." Blake asked. "Anthea, did you make all this by yourself?" She confirmed. "Yes, Your Highness." "Wow." Blake stared at the food, clearly impressed, and asked, "So how do you eat this?" Anthea giggled inwardly. This must be the first time Blake is having Korean food, she thought. She said, "Oriental cuisine is quite different from our normal fare, isn't it? I too discovered Asian food recently. These are Korean-style meatballs. They're called dongrangting." Blake listened intently, nodding. Anthea added with a playful smile, "Because they're round and cute, just like you." Blake blushed slightly. "You think I'm cute?" Piercing the meatball with a fork, Anthea laughed and said, "Yes, you're like a little bunny rabbit. Now open your mouth." Blake obediently opened his mouth as Anthea fed him a meatball. Nom nom. Blake chewed, his face lighting up, his eyes widened in delight. He said, "Wow, so yummy!" Anthea asked, while her heart warming at the sight of his happiness. "Do you like them?" Blake nodded enthusiastically. Yes, yeah," Anthea said, while gesturing toward the steaming pot. Now, this stew is called doenjangjigi. Try it on your own, Anthea told. It has a peculiar taste, so if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. Okay. Blake scooped some up, taking a cautious bite. Anthea thought, watching him closely, I wonder if he'll like it. He's probably tasted nothing like it before. Blake exclaimed. This is good. It's the yummiest thing I've had in my entire life. Anthea couldn't help but smile, proud of her efforts. Then I'll make it for you often. Yippee! Blake cheered, his joy infectious. Anthea mused fondly, it feels like I'm with a little son rather than a husband. But this is just fine. She knew that for Blake to be freed from his curse, he had to fall in love with Diana. I'm going to stay by his side, make him happy, and watch over him until he becomes an adult. Once he reaches adulthood, I will leave him. Anthea was determined to save Blake, but she understood her limitations. I want to save Blake, I really do. But I don't have the power to release him from his curse. My role is to protect him just until he meets Diana. According to the original novel, Blake would suffer 3 tragedies during his childhood. First, he inherited the family curse. Second, his bride, Anthea, kills herself on their wedding day. And finally, he suffers the death of his father, Emperor Destined. When Emperor Destined passed away, Blake's uncle, the Duke of Carseal, would become the next emperor. Richard, the main hero of the novel, was the bastard son of the Duke of Carseal. Blake's uncle would strip him of his title as crown prince, and the cursed boy, still young and weak, would be exiled to a southern island where he would endure a horrible childhood. Blake inherited his curse long before I entered Anthea's body. She thought sadly, there's nothing I can do to help him in this respect. However, Emperor Destined's death still lies ahead in the future. If I try, maybe I can prevent it. She thinks, after Blake's wedding ceremony in the novel, the Emperor had gone to the Valley of Chaos. Anthea decided she would wait patiently until he returned. After a few days, Anthea concluded, as it turned out, Blake loved Korean food. He didn't pretend to like it out of politeness. His admiration was genuine, he said with respect. Anthea, this is so good! Seeing his happiness, Anthea was filled with a sense of purpose. She thinks in her mind, he really seemed to enjoy Korean cuisine. She resolved, I want to make Korean food the authentic way. But to do that, she realized she would need a furnace and a cauldron. This nation has relatively advanced ovens, she noted, her mind whirling with ideas. I think I'll draw a picture of a traditional Korean cauldron and ask the goldsmith to make one for me. Once the cauldron is made, I'll ask him to build a furnace in the palace kitchen. Anthea wandered around, measuring potential spots. Now, where would be a good spot to place the cauldron? Just as she was inspecting a corner, a voice startled her. What are you doing here? Someone came and stood near her. She heard the sound of steps. Ah! She yelped, jumping in surprise. Turning her head, she said, Hey! You scared me! The person apologized. Extending his hand toward her, he said, Sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Examining him, Anthea thinks, dark eyebrows, a sculpted jawline, a scar on his neck, and fiery red eyes like a wild animal's. I instinctively knew who he was. Richard? This young boy could only be Richard Carseal, the hero of Lady and the Beast, he greeted with a smirk. Long time, no see, Anthea. Anthea thinks, I was right. Richard was the second son of the Duke of Carseal, the Emperor's younger brother. Since the curse, Blake was destined to die a tragic young death. The Duke and his sons were next in line for the throne. Richard's mother had been a slave, which excluded him from the line of succession. But that never stopped him. Richard was ambitious. One by one, he eliminated his rivals, eventually ascending to the throne. Towards the end of the novel, Richard used Diana to eliminate Blake. She shakes her head and thinks, No, I won't let that happen. Emperor Destined will not die a sudden death, and Blake will not be stripped of his crown. I won't allow it. She resolved herself and stands up. Anthea asked, And what brings you here? Richard said. You caused quite an uproar from the first day of your marriage. I heard you let go of practically all the court staff. Anthea raised an eyebrow and thinks. In the process, I eliminated all the spies you planted in the palace. That must have riled you up, Anthea asked. What's your point? He remarked. That was rather hasty of you and quite unlike your usual self, Anthea asked. Hasty, you say? Richard explained. The Hamill family has the confidence and trust of His Imperial Majesty. It was rash of you to send his eldest son to the dungeon. All the court staff were personally selected by His Majesty. It wasn't right to cast them away like that, Anthea furiously thought inwardly. They were spies of you and your family, and you dare lecture me? Then Anthea composed herself and said, We can't have untrustworthy people by our side. Richard told. One needs tolerance when dealing with inferiors. You cannot gain their loyalty if you kick them out on a sudden whim, Anthea reminded him. I believe you are stepping out of line, my lord. This does not concern you. If you have nothing else to say, please go. Richard didn't move. Instead, he leaned in slightly, a sly smile on his lips. Are you still upset? Taken aback, Anthea asked. Excuse me? He asked again. Are you still sulking because I refuse to accept your love? Anthea's mind reeled. What is this bullshit? Richard said with mock pity. Anthea, I know you like me. I'm sorry I can't return your affections. As you know, I'm a bastard son. I would be defying the Emperor if I asked for your hand. Anthea stared at him in disbelief. She thought, you dirty dog. So this is how he would woo, use, and cast away his lovers, huh? Conniving little prick. Richard gave me a patronizing look. Sweet, kind Anthea. You understand my delicate predicament, don't you? He added. I know you like me. That was it. Anthea lost her reason right about now. She straightened up. With her voice firm she said, Sir Richard, you are being delusional. Who says I like you? Richard blinked, momentarily thrown off. Anthea continued. Richard Carseal, I've had enough of your rudeness. How dare you show such disrespect to the crown princess? This is a grave discourtesy to the imperial throne, Richard asked, his voice dipping into a more serious tone. Anthea, are you still mad at me? As he said, he tried to grab Anthea's hand. Suddenly, Blake cut through the tension and grabs Richard's hand before he can grab Anthea's hand. While startled, Anthea said, Your Highness, Blake said. Stop. Can't you see Anthea is displeased? Richard said. There must be some misunderstanding, Your Highness. Lady Valencia and I are childhood friends. Blake interrupted coldly. Richard, do not address her as Lady Valencia. She is the crown princess, Richard said. Please forgive me, Your Highness. It was my mistake. Richard bowed, attempting to recover his dignity. Blake's gaze was cold. He said, From now on, be careful. The next time you are discourteous to the princess, you will not be forgiven. Now get out of here. He flicked his hand dismissively. Richard shuddered, hesitating for a moment before turning on his heel to leave. Duh! Anthea mumbled under her breath, still disgusted by Richard's arrogance. Blake, noticing her expression, touched her hand gently and said, Don't look that way. Turning her head towards Blake, Anthea said, Excuse me? His grip firm yet tender. He said softly, Anthea, don't look at other men. Anthea blinked again, processing his words before smiling. She said, Don't worry. I won't. Blake's hand tightened slightly, as if reassured by her response. Anthea added, Besides, that wasn't a man. That was a dog. Blake asked. A dog? Her anger flaring up again, she exclaimed. Yes. A total son of a dog. How dare he think I like him? He must be crazy. Some nerve. Blake's expression softened, but there was a hint of uncertainty. He asked, Then, you don't like him? Richard is very popular. She made a face of pure disgust. She declared, Yuck. I abhor those types of smooth-talking rakes. What a turn-off. Blake blinked, watching her reaction with wide eyes. She said while giggling, I prefer cute guys that remind me of bunny rabbits. Blake's eyes widened further, blinking rapidly in surprise, as a faint blush dusted his cheeks. He murmured. He reached up to rub his cheek gently, caressing the soft skin as his blush deepened. Looking at him, Anthea feels touched as her was tension melting away. I can feel all my anger just melting away too, Anthea asked suddenly. What kind of women does your highness like? Blake's response was immediate. I like you, Anthea, Anthea asked again. No, I mean, what type do you like? Without missing a beat, Blake replied. Anthea, you're my type. All I need is you. Blake hugs her as he said. His words struck her like an arrow to the heart. She replied, I feel the same way about you, your highness. Feeling the temperature of water, Anthea said to herself. Just the way I like it. She then went to where Blake was present and said, Your highness, he asked. Yes? What is it, Anthea? He added, sensing something on her mind. Anthea said, Starting today, I'll assist you in taking a bath. Blake's eyes widened in shock. What? He trembled, clearly embarrassed. Maybe later, he mumbled, trying to evade the topic. Anthea grabbed his shoulders and said, Your Highness? I've already drawn you a bath. She grabbed him with iron grip. He protested. No! What if you get infected with my curse? Anthea reassured him. That won't happen. But Blake wasn't convinced. No! You could be doomed to unhappiness. Rumor had it that anyone who saw or touched the cursed sigils would be cursed or visited by misfortune. That was why the cursed successor couldn't step outside and was exiled to the southern islands. Blake, like all the cursed ancestors before him, should have been stripped of his title and banished from the imperial palace as soon as the marks appeared. But Emperor Thenston loved his son too much to let that happen. Anthea tries to convince him. I am not unhappy at all. Please ignore such false rumors, Blake said. What if it's not a rumor? Anthea countered. But I've already seen your face and held your hand. And I'm fine. His voice cracked with shame. The whorls on my face and hands are small. Those on my body are huge, Anthea said softly, placing her hand over his. Prince Blake, he pulled away, clenching his fists. They're horrible. I'm a monster. Crouching in fear, he said, I know you'll hate me if you see them. His voice was filled with anguish. Blake dropped his head in defeat. Anthea said, Your Highness. Anthea thinks, so the rumors are just an excuse. He didn't want to show me the marks on his body, not because of the curse, but because of his own insecurities. I've already seen the whorls on his face and hands, so I thought he wouldn't mind me seeing them on his body. I was wrong, she said gently as she gets close. Your Highness, look at me. Blake hesitated but lifted his head. Sitting in front of him, Anthea said, I've already told you before, you are not a monster. You are not monstrous. She reached out, caressing his face tenderly. She said, And touching you will not bring me unhappiness, she added. Ever since I married you, I've been happy. Every single day, he asked. You're happy? Her heart swelling with affection. She said, Yes. I'm happy that you are my husband. Then they hugged each other. Hugging her, Blake said, I'm also very happy because I married you. Then Anthea said, But then, don't ever say you're a monster, all right? He replied, All right. She then again asked, Shall we take a bath now? Blake gets startled again. He shakes his head in denial. Anthea asked, Why not? I just told you. I don't mind the marks on your body. He mumbles. I'm ashamed to show myself, Anthea teasingly said. You're embarrassed? While blushing, Blake said, Don't make fun of me. She continued, I'm not making fun of you. I just think you're cute. Blake protested. See? You're making fun of me again. Anthea asked, If you're this shy, how did you endure the maid waiting on you while taking a bath? He answered, I had no problem before, because it wasn't you. Anthea asked, Are you discriminating against me, Prince Blake? Opposing her, Blake said, And no, of course not. Anthea squeezes his hand and said, If that's true, step into the bathtub. Blake nods his head, resolving himself. Before undressing, he pauses and hesitatingly said, You'd better promise that you won't take fright. Anthea said, You promise not to say anything like that anymore. Blake countered, Don't forget, you promised not to hate me after seeing my body. Anthea said, If you talk this way again, I'm really going to be mad. I mean it this time. While concerned, Blake again said, Promise not to leave me. Anthea thinks, I must leave Blake before he turns 18 years old. Only the novel's heroine, Diana, can free him from his curse. My role in this story is to protect him throughout his childhood and back away when the time is right. Blake asked, Why won't you answer me? As tears dropped from his face, he asked, Anthea, are you planning to leave me? Anthea clenches his fist and said, No, of course not. She thinks inwardly, I'm sorry I have to lie. She then said, Where would I go without my little bunny rabbit husband? But this is a white lie. He asked, You promise? Wiping tears from his face, Anthea said, I promise. This is my home now. Let's go take a bath. We don't want the water to get cold, do we? Blake replied, All right. After that, Blake hesitates, but still took of his shirt. Meanwhile, sitting in his room, Richard thinks, All the spies that we planted in the Crown Prince's household have been sent off. Anthea fired all the chief courtiers and servants. My father, the Duke of Carseal, and my half-brother Frank were furious that their plans had been foiled by a mere 10-year-old girl. The maid who had assisted Blake in taking his bath had been a key informant. It was such a shame that she had been let go. However, I still have a useful card up my sleeve. Taking a sip of tea, he thinks, the Crown Princess, Anthea. Anthea used to adore me, and the naive simpleton didn't even bother to hide her feelings. It was so easy to tempt a little child who was lonely and in despair. If I could use the crown princess as my puppet, she would be more effective than 10 other spies combined. That's why I'd gone to the wing of the palace where the crown prince resides. He recalled the scene in his mind. Anthea said, "I've had enough of your rudeness. How dare you show such disrespect to the crown princess? This is a grave discourtesy and slight to the imperial throne." He processes, but things didn't go according to plan. The crown prince has changed too. Not only did he use his strength on me, but something about him is fundamentally different. Anthea's presence must have had an effect on that monster. All of a sudden, Anthea seems very desirable. I want her. Looking at the marks on Blake's body, Anthea said to herself, I must not show an ounce of surprise or dread. Anthea looks at him for a moment, then grabs his hand and asked, "Why are you so skinny? Now, let's get in the water." "I don't want you to catch a cold," Blake replied. "Okay." While rinsing his body, Anthea thinks the cursed whirls cover half of his tiny frame. He's only 8 years old. She remembered, according to the novel, Blake suffers excruciating pain in the deep layers of his flesh as the marks spread. "Poor little thing, how you must have suffered." Anthea touched the marks with her hand and Blake said, "Don't touch me. What if you get infected?" Anthea replied, "I won't. And if you say that one more time, I'm really going to get angry," Blake replied with a sad expression. "All right." While rinsing him off, Anthea sings a melody. "My little hubby's chubby tummy." Blake heard it and quickly said, "I don't have a chubby tummy." Anthea thought after his reaction. "It's just a song." She said, "You do too." While panicking, Blake said, "Oops. It's sticking out just a teeny bit because I just ate." Anthea said, "See, it is sticking out a little." Blake pouted and said, "Then I'm not going to have dinner anymore." Peeved, Anthea then said, "Then you won't grow, and I'll always be taller than you?" he asked. "Oh no! Then what should I do?" He sat there in sorrow. Anthea giggles and said, "I was just kidding. You don't have a chubby tummy, so eat lots of food, okay?" Anthea pats his head. She added, "Then you can grow tall and handsome." Blake's face glowed up and he said, "Okay, I'll eat lots of food so I can grow big and strong," she said. "Please do," Blake then said while determined. "Yup, soon I'm going to be bigger and stronger than you." After some time, looking at a box with a letter and roses, Anthea thought, "What's this? A present from Richard? And a letter of apology?" Anthea read the letter. It was as, "I am so sorry about what happened yesterday. Please accept this as a token of my regret, blah blah blah." Anthea thinks in her mind, "What's this guy up to? Something smells fishy. Does he think I can be useful to him? Is he trying to seduce me into becoming one of his spies?" Anthea was processing. "I thought I made myself very clear that day. I guess he's still delusional." Then Anthea called, "Melissa, could you please send these back?" "No, return the letter also. That way, he won't be confused about my intentions," Melissa complied. "As you wish, Your Highness. I understand." Then Anthea thinks, I hope he gives up his nasty plans." After some time, Richard sent flowers and gifts again and again, but Anthea sent them all back. Again someday, Butler Hans said, "Good morning, Your Highness." "Sir Richard," Anthea cut him off and said, "Hans, I told you there's no need even to tell me. Just send them back," Hans said. "I was going to do that, ma'am. But this time, he has sent a priceless treasure," Anthea asked. "A treasure?" Hans replied. "Yes, Your Highness. It's a ring set with mermaid's breath." Anthea felt rage and said, "Crazy bastard. Mermaid's breath is a mana stone that contains the power of the sea. There are only a few in existence in the entire world. In Lady and the Beast, Richard gave Diana that mermaid's breath ring. Anthea wonders, why did he give me this? This should go to Diana. He's lost his mind in his desire to recruit me as his spy." She remembered in the novel, it is described as one of the most beautiful jewels in the entire world. "I'm rather curious, but I won't take a look. Who knows what Richard is up to? I refuse to fall into his trap," Anthea said to Hans. "I don't want to see it. You can tell him that I wouldn't even accept a mine full of mana stones from him," she said with a determined resolve, so he should stop wasting his time and mine. After a few days, Anthea went outside the palace with Melissa and Sir Edmund. Excited by this outing, Anthea said, "Melissa! Edmund! Come quick! It must be over there!" Melissa said, "Your Highness, could you please slow down a little?" But Anthea was excited to leave the palace grounds for the very first time. Anthea dashed towards the blacksmith's. Standing in front of the blacksmith's shop, Anthea's heart raced. The blacksmith's, at last! Inside the shop she pulled out a design. This is the cauldron that I want custom made. Do you think you can do it? Blacksmith thinks for a moment, looking at the design, and then said, I shall give it a try, your highness, he reassured. There's nothing I can't make with my forge, the blacksmith boasted confidently. Anthea said, Thank you, he replied. It's my pleasure, ma'am. While on the way back, Melissa inquired, Your highness, is there any other place you'd like to go to? Anthea refused, she said. No, let's return to the palace now. She thinks in her mind, Blake is probably wondering where I am, and waiting for my return. Anthea rushed back to the palace, practically hopping with excitement. Blake was there waiting for her, beaming as he saw her approach. He called Anthea and quickly rushed to her and hugs her. He asked while smiling, Did you have a nice time in the town area? Anthea replied, Yes, thank you. I had a nice day. Blake asked, concerned. Was there anyone or anything bothering you today? Anthea reassured him, gently stroking his hair. Not at all. Did you worry about me? Blake said. Yes. It was getting late, and you weren't coming home, she said to herself. I'm glad I returned to the palace straight away. Anthea then puts his hand on Blake's face and said, Now why don't we take off your mask? She pulled it off and said, I'm sure you will feel much more comfortable. Blake hesitated and said, Anthea, you always want me to take off my clothes. Now you want me to take off my mask too? Anthea thought. Wow, now you're talking like a hero of a trashy novel. People might get the wrong idea, she said with a grin, while caressing him. Why not? It always makes me happy to see the handsome face of my husband, Blake said, blushing. It always makes me happy to see you too, Anthea, she asked hopefully. Then will you take off your mask when it's just the two of us? He replied. Sure. Anthea noticed how touchy-feely Blake was acting. She asked, Prince Blake, did something happen while I was away? No, nothing, Blake replied quickly. Anthea asked again, Are you sure? Blake hesitated, then finally admitted, Well, to be honest, I was a little afraid that you had run away from me. But now that I know you won't abandon me like that, I'm fine. Anthea noticed his hands were shaking. She said, Do not worry, dear husband. I am not going anywhere. Really? Blake asked, thrilled. She said, Yes, really. But if, by any chance, you fall in love with someone else, I shall not be in your way. Blake asked, confused. Why do you say that? Anthea explained. Our marriage was arranged by the Emperor, your father. It was not done with your approval or consent. Later on, when you are all grown up, you may discover that you love someone else, Blake declared firmly. No, Anthea. I will always love you and only you, Anthea said to him. Your Highness, when you become an adult and are released from your curse, you will become the most dashing prince. Beautiful women from all over the world will fall in love with you, Blake said earnestly. You are the most beautiful woman in the world, Anthea said. Maybe for now, but you may change your mind once you are older. You are still young, so, Blake said with serious expressions. Madam, you are my one and only wife, and I, Prince Blake, am your one and only husband. I don't need any other woman, Blake asked while tensed. By any chance, do you feel the need for another man? She exclaimed. No, of course not. All I ever want or need is you, your Highness. Anthea thought, Diana is the only person in the world who can free Blake from his curse. White lies are all very nice, but I really should not cross the line. Then Blake hugs her, and while embraced he said, I know I'm being selfish, but could you please stay by my side, just until my death? It won't be too long. Anthea felt touched and tears start falling from her face. She said while trying to stop her tears, You will not die! I won't let it happen! To hell with curses! Blake was flustered, he said. Please don't cry, Anthea. I'm so sorry. Forget what I just said, Anthea said. Don't. Your shirt is getting soiled. Blake was gently wiping her tears away. He said, It's all right. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A butler came and said, Your Highnesses, His Imperial Majesty has returned to the palace. Anthea thought, finally Blake's father, the most powerful emperor in all of history, Emperor Thenston, has returned to the palace.